The stars in the Caldrex Nebula shimmered with a strange purple glow, casting eerie shadows across the hulls of hundreds of warships. The vessels hung suspended in space like metal monuments to survival. Some were sleek and silver, others crystalline and glowing with inner light. Each ship represented a different species, a different world, all united in one purpose. They had won. Commander Xylith stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, her forearms crossed in a gesture of satisfaction. Her scaled skin reflected the soft blue light of the command displays. Around her, officers from a dozen different species worked at their stations, their voices a mixture of clicks, chirps, and translated speech. But today, even the usual military discipline couldn't contain the joy that filled the air. "Commander, the final casualty reports are in," said Lieutenant Corvus, an insectoid officer whose compound eyes gleamed in the light. "We've lost 40% of the fleet. 347 ships destroyed, 212 severely damaged." Xylith nodded slowly. The numbers were heavy, but they could have been so much worse. "And the Varkesh?" "Scattered, broken. Our scouts report no organized formations within 20 sectors. The swarm is finished." A cheer erupted across the bridge. Officers embraced, some crying tears of relief, others making sounds that their translators couldn't quite capture, but everyone understood as pure joy. Xylith allowed herself a rare smile. The Varkesh swarm had been unstoppable, a living tide of bioships that consumed everything in their path. They had destroyed 12 entire sectors, wiping out countless civilizations. The Galactic Coalition had thrown everything at them, and it had barely been enough. "Open a channel to all ships," Xylith commanded. Her voice carried across every vessel in the fleet. "Warriors of the Coalition," she began. "Today we have achieved what many thought impossible. We have stopped the swarm. We have saved our worlds, our families, our future. This victory belongs to every species here. Every soldier who gave their life, every captain who held the line when retreat seemed wise. We are not just a fleet. We are proof that unity can overcome any threat." The cheering intensified. On the main view screen, Xylith could see other ships lighting up their hulls in celebration, firing their weapons harmlessly into empty space in traditional salutes. The Centauri frigates spun in elegant patterns. The Draxian cruisers released clouds of glowing particles that formed the symbols of victory in a dozen languages. Ambassador Theron of the Primus Collective approached Xylith, his tall, thin frame moving with careful grace. "Commander, the Council wishes to convene a ceremony. Medals for valor, treaties of eternal friendship, perhaps even the founding of a new era of peace." "Peace." Xylith repeated the word like a prayer. "Yes, we've earned it." The celebration continued for hours. Ships docked with one another, crews mixing in ways that military protocol usually forbade. Stories were shared, drinks were poured, and promises were made. Never again would they allow such a threat to grow unchecked. Never again would they be caught unprepared. In the command center, Xylith reviewed the strategic maps with her senior staff. The Varkesh had been pushed back, their hive worlds destroyed or abandoned. The swarm's coordination had broken down, leaving only mindless fragments fleeing in all directions. "We'll need patrol groups to hunt down the remnants," said Captain Vex, a reptilian officer with scars crossing his face. "But nothing organized. Small packs at most." "Agreed," Xylith said. "We'll establish a perimeter and—" The alarm interrupted her. A sharp, piercing sound that immediately silenced every conversation on the bridge. Officers rushed back to their stations, their celebration forgotten in an instant. "Report," Xylith barked. "Slipspace signatures." Lieutenant Corvus's voice was tight with tension. "Multiple contacts emerging at the edge of the nebula. 6 massive signatures, Commander. Very massive." Xylith's blood went cold. "Varkesh?" "Negative. The signatures are wrong. These are— I don't know what these are." On the view screen, space itself seemed to tear open. 6 points of brilliant light expanded, and from them emerged ships unlike anything Xylith had ever seen. They were enormous, each one easily twice the size of the Eternal Dawn. But where Coalition ships were elegant and sleek, these were brutal and blocky. Their hulls were covered in thick plates of dark metal, overlapping like the scales of some ancient predator. Strange symbols were painted on their sides in bright white. Weapons bristled from every surface. Not the elegant energy cannons of the Coalition, but crude-looking tubes and rails that could only be kinetic weapons. The kind of weapons most civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago as primitive and inefficient. Are they Varkesh variants? Someone whispered. No, Corvus said, his mandibles clicking nervously. Scanning now. The hull composition is metal. Simple iron and steel alloys, mostly. There are organic signatures inside, but they're not Varkesh. These are crude vessels. Hail them, Xylith ordered. All frequencies. The communications officer worked frantically. No response on quantum channels. No response on psionic bands. No response on, wait, I'm receiving something on electromagnetic frequencies. Electromagnetic? Captain Vex sounded shocked. That's ancient technology. Who still uses radio waves? Put it through, Xylith said. The view screen flickered and a face appeared. It was a human face, though Xylith had never seen a human before. The species was from a quarantine sector, a primitive world that had barely discovered nuclear power the last time the Coalition checked. They shouldn't even have space travel yet. The human was female, with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to contain barely controlled fury. She wore a uniform of dark blue with strange symbols on the shoulders. This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet, the woman said, in a voice that was calm but carried an edge like a blade. We've been tracking the Varkesh swarm to this location. We're here to finish what they started with our world. Xylith stared at the screen, her mind racing. Terran, Earth? How was this possible? Admiral Chen, she said carefully. This is Commander Xylith of the Galactic Coalition. The swarm has been defeated. We've just won the battle. The war is over. The human admiral's expression didn't change. We'll confirm that ourselves. And in that moment, as the 6 massive dreadnoughts powered forward, their weapon systems coming online with an ominous hum that could be felt even through the vacuum of space, Xylith realized that the celebration might have been premature. The 6 Terran Dreadnoughts maintained their position at the edge of the nebula, their massive hulls reflecting the purple starlight in dull, threatening gleams. Every weapon system on every Coalition ship had been trained on them, but no one had given the order to fire. The tension in the fleet was thick enough to cut with a blade. Commander Xylith studied the human vessels on her tactical display. The more data her sensors gathered, the more confused she became. These ships were impossibly crude by galactic standards, yet impossibly large. Their armor was layers upon layers of simple metal alloy, thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. No energy shields at all, which seemed insane. Their weapons were almost entirely kinetic, projectile-based weapons that threw metal slugs using magnetic rails or chemical explosions. This doesn't make sense, Captain Vex muttered beside her. According to our records, Earth was quarantined 400 years ago. They had just split the atom. They shouldn't even have fusion reactors yet, let alone faster than light travel. Ambassador Theron floated closer, his face pale. Could they have stolen the technology? Perhaps from a crashed ship? No, Lieutenant Corvus said, adjusting his displays. I'm reading their reactor signatures now. They're not using quantum cores or zero-point energy. These are fusion reactors, multiple fusion reactors per ship. Dozens of them. They're brute-forcing their way through physics. Xylith shook her head in disbelief. Fusion was clean and simple but inefficient. You needed massive reactors to power a ship, which made them impractical for anything but small vessels. These humans had apparently just decided to build bigger ships and pack them full of reactors. It was the engineering equivalent of solving a math problem by hitting it with a hammer until it gave you the answer you wanted. Hail them again, she ordered. I want to understand what we're dealing with. The view screen flickered and Admiral Chen's face reappeared. Behind her, Xylith could see the human bridge. It was cramped and utilitarian, with crew members strapped into seats and physical screens showing data. No holographic displays, no neural interfaces. Everything was manual, physical, and somehow that made it more intimidating. Admiral Chen, Xylith began, keeping her voice diplomatic. We appreciate your concern about the Varkesh, but I assure you the threat has been neutralized. Perhaps we should discuss this more calmly. Our records show that Earth was designated a developing world under Coalition protection protocols. How did you acquire faster-than-light technology? The human admiral's expression remained stone cold. We acquired it because we had to. The Varkesh didn't care about your protection protocols when they hit Earth 200 years ago. The bridge went silent. 200 years? That was impossible. The swarm had only entered Coalition space 70 years ago. I don't understand, Xylith said slowly. The Varkesh swarm was first detected by Coalition scouts 70 years ago in the Outer Rim. They reached Earth 130 years before that, Chen replied flatly. 3 billion people died in the first month. Our defenses were nothing. Nuclear weapons barely scratched their bioships. They consumed our orbital stations, our moon bases, everything. Then they left, moving toward what they considered more advanced prey. They dismissed us as not worth the effort to completely destroy. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Xylith felt her stomach turn. We didn't know. Of course you didn't know. You quarantined us and forgot about us. You're so busy maintaining your galactic order that you don't notice when species on the edges get attacked. The Varkesh taught us a valuable lesson that day. No one was coming to save us. If we wanted to survive, we had to save ourselves. Captain Vex stepped forward. Even so, building ships like these, developing FTL technology, that should have taken centuries. How did you manage it? For the first time, something like emotion crossed Admiral Chen's face. It might have been pride or perhaps bitterness. We put everything into it. Every resource, every mind, every dream. Earth became a fortress world. We militarized everything. Our children grew up learning weapons engineering before they learned art. Our greatest scientists abandoned pure research to build better armor, faster engines, bigger guns. We hollowed out asteroids and turned them into shipyards. We tested our reactors by crashing them into moons to see how big the explosion would be. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. We didn't waste time making our ships pretty. We didn't develop elegant solutions. We built them thick, packed them with guns, and trained our crews to take damage and keep fighting. Every simulation, every training exercise was about fighting the Varkesh. We've been hunting them for 2 centuries, following their trail across space, always one step behind. Until now. Ambassador Theron made a soft sound of distress. But the cost? Your entire civilization focused on war? The cost was survival, Chen said simply. And now we're here to finish what the swarm started with our world. We owe them 3 billion deaths. Xylith chose her next words carefully. Admiral, I understand your anger. But the swarm is broken. We've destroyed their hive worlds, scattered their forces. What remains are just fragments running on instinct. The war is won. Then you won't mind if we verify that personally. Before Xylith could respond, alarms blared across the bridge again. Lieutenant Corvus shouted over the noise. Contact! Multiple Varkesh bioships emerging from behind the nebula's far edge. They're organizing into attack formation. The tactical display erupted with red markers. Dozens of Varkesh ships, perhaps 100, were grouping together. They must have been hiding in the dense gas clouds, waiting for the coalition fleet to let down its guard. All ships to battle stations, Xylith commanded. Reform defensive positions. Get our damaged vessels behind the line. But the coalition was in no shape for another fight. Their shields were depleted, their hulls were damaged, and their crews were exhausted. The celebration had left them scattered and disorganized. They're charging weapons, Corvus reported, his voice tight. They'll be in firing range in 90 seconds. Xylith turned to the view screen, about to ask the humans for assistance, but Admiral Chen was already giving orders to her own fleet. All ships engage at will, Chen said calmly. Show them what happens when you anger Earth. The 6 Terran Dreadnoughts surged forward, their crude engines burning bright against the dark of space. And as they accelerated toward the Varkesh, Xylith realized she was about to witness something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity at war. The Varkesh bioships looked like massive insects crossed with deep-sea creatures, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. They moved in perfect coordination, 100 ships acting as one mind, just as they always had. Their weapons, grown rather than built, charged with crackling green energy. The coalition fleet scrambled to form defensive lines, but they were slow and disorganized. Ships that had been docked for celebration struggled to separate. Crews that had been drinking and celebrating fumbled their way back to battle stations. The exhaustion of the previous battle weighed on every movement. Commander Xylith watched helplessly as the Varkesh closed the distance. Her own shields were at 30%. Most of her weapons needed time to recharge. The Eternal Dawn could maybe survive 1 or 2 volleys, but not a sustained assault. All ships focus fire on their lead elements, she ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. Buy time for the damaged vessels to retreat. The coalition fleet opened fire, but their shots were scattered and weak. Energy beams that should have punched through bioarmor barely scorched the surface. The Varkesh had adapted as they always did. Their hulls had evolved to resist the coalition's weapons. Then the Terran Dreadnoughts entered range, and everything changed. The first thing Xylith noticed was the sound. Even through the vacuum of space, through the hull of her ship, she felt it. A deep, resonating thunder that rattled her bones. The dreadnoughts had opened fire with their railguns, and the sheer volume of metal being thrown through space created vibrations that traveled through the debris field and into every nearby ship. The Varkesh lead ship simply exploded. One moment it was there, the next it was a cloud of organic matter and flash-frozen fluid. The railgun slug had hit with such force that it hadn't just penetrated the hull, it had transferred enough kinetic energy to turn the entire vessel into vapor. By the ancients, Captain Vex whispered. The humans didn't slow down. All 6 dreadnoughts fired in sequence, their railguns creating a continuous stream of hypervelocity projectiles. Each slug was the size of a small shuttle, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by magnetic rails running the length of the ships. The Varkesh bioarmor, which had evolved to disperse energy weapons, meant nothing against simple kinetic force. A Varkesh ship tried to dodge, but the humans had anticipated it. Missile pods along the dreadnought's flanks opened up, releasing hundreds of warheads. These weren't elegant guided missiles with sophisticated tracking systems. These were simple rockets with basic sensors and very large explosive payloads. They filled space with a cloud of fire and shrapnel that the Varkesh ship flew straight into. It emerged on the other side as a burning wreck. "They're shields," Lieutenant Corva said, his voice filled with confusion. "They're not using shields at all." He was right. The Varkesh were firing back now, their bioplasma weapons hitting the Terran ships directly. Green energy splashed across the dreadnoughts' hulls, and Xylith expected to see the vessels torn apart. But the armor held. Layers of thick metal plating absorbed the impacts, melting and boiling away, but the ships kept coming. Their hulls were so thick that the Varkesh weapons couldn't penetrate deep enough to hit anything vital. "They're just tanking it," Vex said in disbelief. They built their ships to simply absorb damage. A group of Varkesh fighters broke off from the main formation, small biocraft that moved with insect-like agility. They were fast and hard to hit, designed to swarm larger vessels and tear them apart with cutting weapons. The Coalition had lost dozens of ships to these fighters in previous battles. The Terran response was immediate. Bay doors along the dreadnoughts opened and smaller craft poured out. Human fighters, if they could be called that. They looked more like flying bricks with engines attached, covered in the same thick armor as their motherships. Where Coalition fighters relied on speed and energy shields, these human craft relied on armor and aggression. What happened next shocked everyone watching. The human fighters didn't try to avoid the Varkesh swarm. They flew straight into it, guns blazing, and those guns, crude chemical propellant weapons that fired solid bullets, tore through the biofighters with devastating effectiveness. The human pilots pulled maneuvers that should have killed them, turned so sharp that the G-forces would crush most species. But the humans endured it, or perhaps they simply didn't care. "Scan those pilots," Xylith ordered. "What are their survival rates for those maneuvers?" Corvus ran the scan and went very quiet. "Commander, those turns are generating 8 to 9 times standard gravity. The pilots should be unconscious. Some of them should be dead." "But they're not." "No, they're fighting like nothing is wrong." A human fighter collided with a Varkesh biocraft deliberately, using its armored hull as a weapon. Both ships were destroyed, but the human pilot had taken 3 Varkesh with them. It wasn't tactics. It wasn't strategy. It was raw, brutal aggression that treated death as just another weapon. The main battle continued with the same horrifying efficiency. The Terran Dreadnoughts plowed through the Varkesh formation, like ancient warships ramming through wooden boats. One dreadnought, its forward armor glowing red-hot from repeated plasma impacts, didn't even bother to slow down. It smashed directly into a Varkesh cruiser, its momentum carrying both ships forward in a tangle of metal and biomatter. Then the human ship's reactor spiked, and Xylith realized what was about to happen. "They're going to detonate it," she said quietly. "That's insane," Theron protested. "That ship has a crew of—" The explosion cut him off. The reactor detonated with the force of a small star going nova. The Varkesh cruiser was instantly vaporized, along with 6 nearby bioships. The dreadnought itself was destroyed, but in dying, it had taken out nearly 1/10 of the Varkesh force. The battle was turning into a massacre. The Varkesh, for all their adaptability and hive-mind coordination, had never faced anything like this. They were designed to fight civilized species that valued their lives and their ships. The humans fought like every battle was their last, like death was acceptable if it meant destroying the enemy. A Varkesh hive ship, The largest vessel in their formation tried to retreat. It was an enormous thing, capable of berthing new bioships and coordinating the entire swarm. The coalition had learned that destroying hive ships was the key to winning battles, but they were heavily defended and difficult to kill. The humans didn't seem to care about difficulty. One of the dreadnoughts broadcast a message on open channels, not to the Varkesh but to its own crew. "Marine boarding team, you are cleared for insertion." Xylith watched in horror as a section of the dreadnought's hull exploded outward, and dozens of small pods launched toward the hive ship. They were boarding pods, simple capsules with one purpose: to punch through the hull and deliver soldiers directly into the enemy vessel. "They're boarding a hive ship?" Captain Vex sounded like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "That's suicide. The interior will be filled with Varkesh warriors. Thousands of them." The pods impacted the hive ship's hull, their shaped charges blowing through the bioarmor, and then somehow Xylith's sensors picked up human life signs inside the hive ship. Fighting, moving deeper into the vessel. "What are they using for weapons?" she asked. Corvus checked his readings and laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Chemical propellant weapons, bullets. They're inside a Varkesh hive ship with guns that shoot bullets." 20 minutes later, the hive ship's life signs began to fail. The coordinated movements of the Varkesh swarm became erratic and confused. And 30 minutes after that, the human marines emerged from the hive ship, their powered armor covered in alien blood, dragging what looked like the hive ship's central nerve cluster. The remaining Varkesh broke and ran, their coordination shattered. The battle was over, 40 minutes from start to finish. The coalition fleet hadn't fired more than a handful of shots. The humans had done it all. Xylith stared at the tactical display, at the wreckage of 100 Varkesh ships, at the 5 remaining Terran Dreadnoughts floating in space like patient predators. "What have we been doing wrong?" she whispered. The meeting took place aboard the Eternal Dawn, in the largest conference room the ship had. Representatives from 43 species filled the space, but all eyes were on the 3 humans who had come aboard. Admiral Chen stood at the center, flanked by 2 of her officers. They wore simple uniforms without the elaborate decorations that most coalition officers favored. Their weapons, crude projectile pistols, were visible on their hips. No one had asked them to disarm. After what everyone had witnessed, it seemed pointless. Commander Xylith stood across from Chen with Ambassador Theron and Captain Vex beside her. Around the room, holographic displays showed the aftermath of the battle. 5 Terran Dreadnoughts remained operational. 1 had been sacrificed, but the Varkesh remnant was completely destroyed. "We need to understand what we just saw," Xylith said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your ships, your tactics, your apparent disregard for your own casualties. How did Earth, a world that should barely have space travel, build a fleet that fights like this?" Admiral Chen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Perhaps it was memory or pain or simply fatigue. "You want to understand? Then I'll tell you exactly what happened to Earth after the Varkesh came." She gestured, and one of her officers activated a portable display device. Images appeared in the air, grainy and old but clear enough. They showed Earth as it had been 200 years ago. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, beautiful and alive. "This was our world before," Chen said. 7 billion people. We had problems, conflicts, but we were growing, exploring. We'd sent our first colony ships to Mars. We were optimistic about the future. The image changed, showing massive organic shapes descending from the sky. The Varkesh, younger and perhaps smaller than they were now, but no less terrible. Cities burned. Oceans boiled. Continents were stripped of life. They came without warning. 3 billion people died in the first 30 days. Our military was nothing against them. Our nuclear weapons barely damaged their bioships. They consumed our orbital infrastructure like it was food, because to them it was. They took our moon bases, our satellites, everything we'd built in space. The images showed desperate battles, human ships and jets firing uselessly at the enormous bioships. It looked hopeless. "Then they left," Chen continued, her voice flat. "They analyzed Earth and decided we weren't worth the effort. We were too primitive, too weak. They moved on to find more advanced civilizations to consume. More challenging prey." Ambassador Theron made a soft sound of distress. "We had no record of this. Our first contact with the Varkesh wasn't for another 130 years. Because you weren't looking. You'd quarantined us, designated us a developing world, and moved on. You were so busy maintaining your galactic order that you never checked to see if we still existed. The accusation hung in the air. Xylith wanted to defend the coalition, to explain that they couldn't monitor every single world, but the words felt hollow even in her mind. So we were alone, Chen said. 4 billion survivors on a devastated world, and we had to make a choice. We could rebuild what we'd lost, try to return to normal, pretend that it was just a natural disaster. Or we could prepare for them to come back. You chose war, Captain Vex said quietly. We chose survival, and we knew that if the Varkesh had dismissed us once, they might do it again. We couldn't become more advanced in ways that would attract their attention too quickly, but we could become more dangerous. So Earth transformed itself. More images appeared. Vast shipyards built in hollowed-out asteroids. Entire cities converted into weapons factories. Children studying engineering and military tactics in schools. Everything everywhere focused on one goal. We didn't waste time on defensive shields because we couldn't match the energy requirements efficiently enough, Chen explained.
So we built thicker armor.
We couldn't develop sophisticated energy weapons, so we perfected throwing metal very, very fast. We couldn't build 100 small ships, so we built 6 dreadnoughts that could take impossible amounts of damage and keep fighting. One of her officers, a young man with scars across his face, spoke up. Every human grows up knowing what the Varkesh did. It's the first thing we learn in school. 3 billion dead. We train in high-gravity environments as standard, because we knew we'd need to pull high-G maneuvers in combat. We study Varkesh biology, Varkesh tactics, Varkesh evolution. We've been preparing for this fight for 200 years. Your Marines, Xylith said, still struggling to understand. They boarded a hive ship. That should have been impossible. Chen's expression hardened. We developed powered armor that could survive in Varkesh environments. We trained in close-quarters combat against simulated Varkesh warriors. We learned that they don't expect boarding actions because most civilized species consider it too dangerous. But humans, we've been fighting in close quarters since we lived in caves. Give us armor and guns and we'll clear any ship you point us at. And your pilot, Corvus added, his voice trembling slightly. The one who deliberately rammed the Varkesh fighter. That was intentional. Pilot Officer Martinez, Chen said. She understood that 3 Varkesh fighters would have reached our bomber wing if she didn't stop them. She made her choice. We honor her sacrifice, the casual way she said it. As if trading 1 life for 3 enemy ships was just simple mathematics. Chilled everyone in the room. Ambassador Theron stepped forward, his hands clasped in a pleading gesture. Admiral Chen, what you've built is impressive and terrifying in equal measure. But surely now with the swarm broken, you can stand down. Join the Galactic Coalition properly. Share your technology with us and we'll share ours. Together we can share technology, Chen interrupted. Like the technology you could have shared with Earth 200 years ago? The shields that might have saved 3 billion people? The weapons that might have stopped the Varkesh before they consumed half our world? The room went silent. Theron's face paled. We didn't know, he whispered. If we had known, we would have helped. Would you? Chen asked. Or would you have debated it in your council? Formed committees to study the problem? Worried about violating your precious Prime Directive or whatever rules you use to justify an action? Xylith forced herself to speak. You're right. We failed you, and I'm sorry. But that doesn't change the current situation. The Varkesh swarm is broken. What do you intend to do now? Chen looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each representative. When she spoke, her voice was firm and left no room for negotiation. We intend to hunt down every last Varkesh in the galaxy. Every hive ship, every bioship, every remnant. We will find them and we will destroy them. We owe 3 billion people that much. And after that? Xylith asked. For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed Chen's face. After that? I don't know. Earth has been at war for 2 centuries. We've built our entire civilization around fighting the Varkesh. When they're gone, we'll have to figure out who we are without an enemy to fight. Captain Vex spoke carefully, and if the Coalition asks you to stop, to let us handle the remnants through proper channels? Chen's hand moved slightly, resting on the pistol at her hip. It wasn't a threat exactly, but everyone noticed. Then we would politely decline, she said. We didn't come all this way to let bureaucracy save the last Varkesh. Even if it means conflict with the Coalition? Theron asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Chen looked at him with eyes that had seen more death than most species could imagine. Ambassador, we fought the Varkesh for 200 years while you didn't even know they existed. We've sacrificed everything to become strong enough to hunt them. Do you really think we're afraid of conflict now? And in that moment, everyone in the room understood. Humanity wasn't asking for permission. They were informing the galaxy of their intentions. The only question was whether the coalition would try to stop them, and whether they even could. The days following the meeting were tense. The coalition fleet remained in the Caldrex Nebula, nominally on station to complete salvage operations and tend to their wounded. But everyone knew they were really there to watch the Terran Dreadnoughts, which sat at the edge of the nebula like patient predators. Commander Xylith hadn't slept properly since the battle. She spent her time reviewing reports, analyzing data, and trying to understand what humanity's arrival meant for the galaxy. The more she learned, the more worried she became. Captain Vex entered her ready room without knocking, his face grim. "You need to see this," he said, activating a display. It showed intercepted communications between the Terran ships. Not military traffic, but something else. Arguments, heated debates among the human leadership. "Our analysts have been monitoring their transmissions," Vex explained. "There's a division in Earth's government. The military command wants to continue their hunt for the Varkesh, treating the coalition as irrelevant at best and an obstacle at worst. But there's a civilian faction that sees this as an opportunity for humanity to finally join galactic civilization." "That's good news, isn't it?" Xylith asked. "Maybe. Or maybe it means we're about to witness a civil war within humanity while they're sitting in our space with weapons that can crack planets." Before Xylith could respond, Lieutenant Corvus rushed in. "Commander, we've received a priority message from Coalition Intelligence. They've located the last Varkesh hive world." Xylith felt her blood go cold. "Where?" "In the Outer Rim in unclaimed space. It's massive, Commander. Our scouts estimate the hive world has a population of over 1 billion Varkesh. It's been there for years, probably a backup colony that the swarm established before we broke their main forces." "Have the humans intercepted this information?" "Almost certainly," Corvus said. "They're monitoring all our communications." The implications were clear. 1 billion Varkesh on one world. Enough to restart the entire swarm if they were given time to breed and build. The coalition would want to contain it, study it, perhaps even attempt communication. It was the kind of problem they solved with committees and careful planning. Humanity would want to sterilize it from orbit. "Call an emergency council meeting," Xylith ordered, "and someone get me a direct line to Admiral Chen." The meeting convened within hours, with representatives from every coalition species attending via holographic link. The chamber was filled with arguments before the session even officially began. Some species wanted to quarantine the hive world, arguing that genocide was never justified. Others wanted to attack it immediately before it could grow stronger. A few, surprisingly, wanted to simply ignore it and hope it remained dormant. When Admiral Chen's image appeared on the screen, the argument stopped. She looked tired, Xylith noticed, as if she too had not been sleeping. "I assume you're all aware of the hive world," Chen said without preamble. Ambassador Theron nodded. "We are. The Coalition Council is currently debating the appropriate response. We believe that with careful planning we can—" "We're going to destroy it," Chen interrupted. The chamber erupted in protest. Theron raised his hands for silence. "Admiral, surely you can understand that we need to consider all options. 1 billion sentient beings, even Varkesh, cannot be exterminated without serious ethical consideration." "They're not sentient in the way you mean," Chen replied. "They're a hive mind. Individual Varkesh have no more consciousness than your blood cells. And I've received my orders from Earth Command. The hive world will be destroyed." Xylith stood up. "And if the Coalition forbids it?" "That's unclaimed space, but we have jurisdiction over actions that affect galactic security." Chen's expression hardened. "Commander, with respect, we didn't ask for permission. We're informing you of our intentions as a courtesy." "This is exactly what we feared," a Draxian representative shouted. "Humanity arrives with their brutal weapons and immediately threatens to commit genocide." "You want to talk about genocide?" Chen's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Let me tell you about the 3 billion humans the Varkesh killed. Let me tell you about the children who were consumed while your coalition was busy maintaining your perfect galactic order. We owe those dead a debt and we're going to pay it." The chamber descended into chaos. Species shouted at each other, alliances fractured, and old grudges surfaced. Xylith watched it all and realized that this was the moment. Everything would change based on what happened next. She made her decision. "Admiral Chen," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. I have a proposal, the chamber quieted. Chen looked at her with cautious interest. Humanity has technology and tactics that the Coalition desperately needs. We've been fighting the Varkesh for 70 years and barely surviving. You've been fighting them for 200 and you've mastered it. If you share that knowledge with us, train our forces, help us become stronger, then the Coalition will support your mission to the Hive world. Commander Xylith, Theron protested. You can't make that agreement without Council approval. I just did, Xylith said firmly, and the Council can overrule me if they want. But they should consider this. Humanity is going to that Hive world whether we approve or not. We can either try to stop them and start a war, or we can work with them and become stronger in the process. Chen studied her for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? A joint operation. Human ships and Coalition ships working together will attack the Hive world with combined forces. In exchange, you'll share your military technology and training methods with the Coalition. Not your most advanced secrets, but enough to make us better at defending ourselves. And Coalition observers on our ships, Chen added, to make sure we're not planning to turn these weapons on you once the Varkesh are gone. That works both ways, Captain Vex interjected. Human observers on our ships to learn our technology as well. True partnership, not just a transfer of knowledge. The chamber erupted in debate again, but Xylith could see that the tide was turning. The species that wanted to fight were pleased that action would be taken. The species that feared humanity were reassured by the oversight. It wasn't perfect, but it was possible. Admiral Chen turned away from the screen, apparently consulting with someone off camera. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. I need to be honest with you, Commander. I was prepared to go to that Hive world with or without your approval. Earth Command wanted me to ignore the Coalition entirely, but there are people on Earth, good people who believe we should be more than just a species defined by revenge. They think we can be part of something larger. And what do you think? Xylith asked. Chen was quiet for a moment. I think that for 200 years we've been alone. We've been angry and hurt and focused on nothing but revenge, and maybe it's time to be something else. But we need to know that the galaxy won't fail us again, that if another threat comes, you'll actually fight instead of forming committees. Then let us prove it, Xylith said. Come to the Hive world with us, fight beside us, and see if we can be worthy allies. The operation was planned over the next week. 15 Coalition ships would join the 5 Terran Dreadnoughts in the assault on the Hive world. It would be the first joint human Coalition military action in history. On the day of departure, Xylith stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, watching as the Terran Dreadnoughts took up formation alongside her fleet. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the view screen. Ready when you are. Commander, Chen said. Then let's finish this, Xylith replied. The combined fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the Caldrex Nebula behind. The Hive world was exactly as the scouts had reported. A massive, organic sphere covered in writhing biostructures, surrounded by hundreds of bioships in various stages of growth. It was both beautiful and horrifying, a monument to the Varkesh's ability to consume and create. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. Coalition ships used their elegant energy weapons to disable the Hive world's defenses, while Terran railguns smashed through hardened targets. Human Marines taught Coalition soldiers how to board bioships without dying. Coalition shield technology was adapted to human ships, making them even tougher. They fought as one, learning from each other, covering each other's weaknesses. And when it was over, when the Hive world was a dead and cooling sphere, when the last Varkesh bioship had been destroyed, the fleet gathered together in space. Commander Xylith and Admiral Chen met in person aboard a neutral shuttle, floating between their fleets. We did it, Xylith said simply. Yes, Chen replied. The Varkesh swarm is finished. After 200 years, Earth's debt is paid. So what happens now? Does humanity go home? Chen looked out at the combined fleet, human and alien ships side by side. We received new orders during the battle. Earth's government has decided that isolation didn't serve us well. We're going to join your coalition, officially, on our terms with our weapons and our methods intact. But we'll join. And your fleet? We'll become the coalition's vanguard force. When threats emerge, we'll be the first to respond. We're good at that. 200 years of practice. Xylith felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. You know, when you first arrived, I thought you might be a bigger threat than the Varkesh.